mula sa Asian Community Development Council. Ito ang PhilAm in Focus. Mondays at 12 noon, right here on PHLV Radio.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to PhilAm in Focus, a program by the Asian Community Development Council, or ACDC, where we dive into the critical issues, challenges, and opportunities affecting Filipino Americans. I am your host, Edelweiss Solano, and I am so thrilled to discuss the topic for today. It's unpacking mental health stigma in Asian communities. And our guest for today is someone who brings both personal insight and professional expertise to this important topic. Trinh Dang, the Executive Director for National Alliance on Mental Illness, Southern Nevada. And Trinh has been a passionate advocate for mental health awareness, education, and breaking the stigma, particularly within our Asian American communities. Trinh, welcome back to ACDC's PhilAm in Focus podcast.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here today.
Yeah, sorry I mispronounce your name. So sorry about that. So
no worries.
And then I know in your previous guestings, I know we'll just dive into it. You've shared powerful stories of your own journey, as well as what led you to your work at NAMI. So if you could revisit one personal story or any experience that you have seen in our community, and if you could share it once again.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when we're talking about mental health, especially in Asian American communities, something that I hear sometimes comes up is we might see it as a weakness, or sometimes people use the word like, oh, they're just crazy. Right? And those are the two biggest things. I think that's a huge challenge for us in our communities, because as we're talking about mental health, and for me, I'm trying to understand, where did that narrative of having a mental health challenge as a weakness come from? Or where did that narrative that, oh, they're just crazy? And really, if you look at historically how mental health has been treated in the past, where decades ago when someone did have a mental health challenge, we didn't talk about recovery, we didn't talk about healing and how trauma actually impacts mental health challenges. But what happened back then was people were locked up and they were put away, they were sent away somewhere, and just that was kind of just it. And so that saying like, oh, they're just crazy, and people are afraid to even talk about it or to say that that's what I'm experiencing, I feel like that's probably a big thing that plays into the stigma today, and also the weakness part. For me, I'm trying to understand from my parents' perspective too, because for them, they're like, oh, we went through so much. We went through war. We went through moving to a whole new country. We went through like racism, discrimination, or all the major things that was really hard. And sometimes, you know, that's kind of where we hold that sense of, this is part of our identity. We went through so much and we can make it through anything. So it may be that, you know, oh, when we're breaking down and we're having emotional challenges, it's seen as a point of weakness from that. But I think reminding people that having, let's say, material wealth, like maybe we built up a lot of what, you know, maybe what we didn't have back then, and we had to give up everything and rebuild. Or if we had went through war and lost everything and we had to rebuild. Just because we have material things doesn't mean that our emotions aren't impacted in some way, because no matter how wealthy or how educated or whatever our background is, our mental health can still be impacted. It's the same way of just saying, you know, we could have health issues like diabetes or cavities with our teeth or high blood pressure and those type of things. It doesn't discriminate between whatever background or social class we come from, but it's really understanding that it's an emotional impact, and it's actually a strength to talk about mental health and our struggles, because imagine how hard it is to open up and actually share, hey, this is something that impacted me and this is what I went through. And to answer your question, a specific story, I was just thinking of, I went to a funeral, a close friend's funeral, and I remember my friend telling me like, oh, my mom didn't even cry because her daughter had passed. And she said she's so strong. And just thinking like, you know, but we have these emotions, again, that comes up. And what I've learned over the years is what can actually lead to mental health challenges is stuffing down the emotions and not experiencing it. It's almost like a drain that gets clogged. Because in my own personal experience, learning how to feel, sometimes you might hear people say you have to feel to heal. So once we feel the emotion, we're able to process it, make sense of it, find ways to cope and like regulate our nervous system, calm ourselves down. To me, that's the part of healing and recovery. But then what I've learned from my personal experiences, because there was a time where I was stuffing all these emotions down from like 10, 20 years ago, it still stays there. It's kind of like when you have a rug and you're just sweeping dirt under the rug. It doesn't actually go away. You don't see it, but it's still there. So until you take it out and actually clear it all out and address it and deal with it, that's the hard part. Like, it's actually scarier sometimes to actually have to face those emotions, our past traumas, which to me takes a lot of strength and courage to do.
And because that means you have to really face it, like what you said. But thank you for providing that historical context. And because that's true, it's very different from how it was handled in the past years. And then also with right now, when we're more open to accepting therapy, talking to someone, asking for help. And also thank you for your vulnerability on sharing your story. And like what you said, it's being able to face it head on, and then find solutions on making sure that you address whatever you have. Because I agree with you with that funeral story that you just shared. You know, like, yes, we tend to, or at least in general, the Asian communities, they tend to just sweep it under the rug, and then, okay, I don't want to deal with this emotion at this time, but it gets clogged up until you just, you know, like a pressure cooker, it will just like burst suddenly. So thank you for, you know, providing that context. And when you say mental health stigma, in the context of AANHPI communities, we're talking about something that isn't talked about. And then as well as stigma is also silence and shame, and also in denial. So what can we, why do you think, aside from being it a part of our culture, why do you think like it's a taboo in our community?
You know, that's a great question, something that I sit and reflect on a lot too, especially that, I think the big word is shame. So I know in especially Asian cultures too, we're so big on family. It's like, I don't want to bring shame to my family, because if I share my story, like there's a phrase or a word in Vietnamese where it basically means like it's so insulting, but what you're saying to the other person is that your parents didn't raise and teach you right. And I think, again, when we go back historically, even psychology and science at one point were blaming mothers and families and parents for mental health challenges with their children in the family. And we have to really look at that and unpack that and say that it's not true. We have to understand generational trauma, that sometimes these things are unintentional. And then two, it's that it's how society is also treating the people that speak up and come out, because there's a difference between if someone comes out and says, yes, my son or daughter has depression and they've had suicide attempts, or my husband has an addiction and they're, you know, using substances, or whatever the mental health challenge is, maybe they're going through psychosis and hearing voices. If we can understand the underlying, I mean, science is still trying to figure out, but there's a lot of links to trauma and understanding that, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's neglect, whether it's going through extreme poverty, war, all the things we've talked about, there's a link to all that. And understanding how did some people come out of it and seem to be doing okay, and why are some people struggling more? And to me, it's one, some people had resources and support, and then others didn't maybe have as much opportunity and access to the resources and support. And the more that we isolate someone by shaming them And that shame comes from our communities. It comes from our family, our friends, of other people saying, oh my gosh, did you hear about so-and-so? They're crazy. Did you hear about this person? They have this problem. Versus, what if we had a community that said, oh my gosh, because think about when someone says they have cancer or they get hospitalized for a car accident. Sometimes what we do is we might come with balloons or think like cards, get well soon cards, or, you know, maybe we're cooking the meals and saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you went through that. Are you okay? Like, how can we come in and support? And unfortunately, what we've seen happen in mental health communities or challenges is people are like, oh my gosh, did you hear what happened? And then they don't talk to them. Mm-hmm. They just disconnect and they, you know, there's not a lot of support. Mm-hmm. And then it makes it even harder for that person to share and to recover, because if we know that support is a huge part of recovery and access to resources, but because of the stigma, people won't say, I have a mental health challenge, and then they won't seek the support. And then that makes it even worse.
Yeah, and it's because of the shame that you mentioned earlier. And there is a word in Tagalog also, it's called hiya. It's like if you are suffering or you're going into a therapy session, you're considered or branded as crazy. And then for parents or their families, is that a failure of parenting. So if we could just have the same support with, you know, those who are suffering from medical health illness, it would be better for our communities, for those who are struggling. And with those challenges, how do you approach your work in the work that you do right now?
Yeah, it's for me, and in the mental health community, we often use the phrase multiple pathways to recovery, because it's not a one-size-fits-all. So we're not saying like everyone has to go to therapy and take medication. That's not it. That works for some people, but not for everyone. So we have to find what works for us. Because growing up with my parents, they were very spiritual. We come from a Buddhist background. And, you know, they would tell me things like, your family member that's hearing voices, that's just, they opened up a portal to another world and demons, or that's their karma, their past life, you know, and that sort of thing. And so that is part of my belief system growing up. And I remember being Asian American, it's like you see both worlds, because I was taking psychology in high school and college, and I'm thinking, okay, they're telling me these things about the brain and about, you know, the neural pathways and about all the sciencey part of it. And then I have the spiritual part of it that my family has taught me growing up. And I believe in both. How do I navigate and integrate both, or is it one or the other? And for me personally, that's where I have my own narrative of how I integrate it together. And what really stuck out to me was my background's in education. So I remember when I was taking a science capstone class at Cal State Long Beach, and one of the professors asked us at the end of the year and said, can researchers and scientists be spiritual and religious? And we had a whole debate on it, and we talked it through. And she said, and what really stuck out to me from that conversation is, it's two sides of the same coin. We're all trying to understand phenomenon that's happening in our world. One side just happens to look at it from a very physical perspective. The other side looks at it from a very energetic or a very spiritual perspective. But is either one wrong or right? And it's like, no, it's just different. They're using different language and different ways to explain similar experiences that we're trying to navigate through the world. Can they both coexist and be true? And I think that's where my light bulb went off, and I was like, oh, so that's where I can integrate my Asian American side of just like what my parents have understood culturally and what science says. It doesn't have to work against each other.
It can work together.
Yeah, because I just think of it like whether we're talking about acupuncture. Science actually shows that acupuncture, which is a very highly utilized modality in Asian American communities. Like I know my parents are like, they'll go to acupuncture. They haven't gone to a therapist. But it actually can help with anxiety, depression, sleep issues, with PTSD. Like the science literature is actually showing how it's impacting our physical body. But if you look into acupuncture, it's a very energetic type of work. And so that's where I see the integration and the combination of the two.
And you call that approach is
multiple
pathways
to recovery.
Yes.
Because some people might choose a very spiritual path, or they might choose a combination of spirituality, therapy, medication, or they might choose in different points of their life. Like maybe, like for me, at one point I was on medication. I've chosen not to be on it anymore because I found other ways to cope with my anxiety, my depression. So there's just so many different ways, whether it's holistic practices, whether it's spirituality, whether it's medical in terms of like the medication route that people talk about. There's no right or wrong way. It's just what works for you and what helps. I think is the biggest and most important part.
And it's the person's discretion on how what approach to take and how they are able to cope up with it individually, but at least the resources are available, and these types of modality are present for anyone to take, not just in the unlike years ago where you will just be thrown into a hospital and have to do with science, and that's it. But it's really from my understanding and your explanation is really a combination of everything and what works for you. So thank you, that's very insightful. And how can then our cultural identity further complicate now mental health awareness and treatment for those mixed races or recent immigrants?
Yeah, it's challenging because as I've looked more into it, like for example, I've shared with my family, they're really big on herbal medicine, like Chinese herbs and those type of things. But when you look at that and you look at, say, the medication, like more Western medication, a lot of them might they have contraindications or you can't mix them. So it's oftentimes like, okay, if I take one, I can't take the other because they might have like adverse effects. And it's just trying to understand and I think, integrate the two. But it's really understanding that we all have our own experiences. We have our backgrounds, we have our beliefs and our cultural backgrounds. And sometimes it might conflict with, another cultural belief. And I think that's the challenging part, that at least for me personally, what I faced of like, well, do I do it this way or do I do it this way? Because they both are very different. And this is what's coming up for me, like when my grandmother had passed. And I brought up the whole story of like when someone said at a funeral, like, oh, you're so strong, you don't cry. I remember I learned from the monks that we had at her service, they were sharing with us that, or like something that I read too, you don't cry. And what they were encouraging us to do was to not cry. And I was wondering, like, what do you mean? But in like what I'm learning is I want to express my emotions. Yes. And so that was very conflicting of, do I cry at this funeral or do I not? But when I learned about this background of the spiritual practices of why in some Buddhist culture, I don't know if it's true for all, but at least in this one, they believe that the afterlife, once someone passes, you have 49 days to kind of figure out what's next, like where to go. And they're still kind of around the space. And if we're crying, it shows them that we're having a hard time letting them go, and it makes it harder for them to
I've heard
leave.
that.
So then I remember thinking that, and I was like, okay, like, again, trying to integrate like my American or my Americanized like perspective and views, and then my Asian or like my Buddhist background or, different cultural aspects together was a bit challenging to navigate. But eventually, I kind of have my own narrative of like, okay, there's going to be times like maybe right after the funeral, it was hard for me. So I still had to express my emotions and cry. But understanding like maybe within the first 49 days of someone passing, because it's part of our Buddhist culture, I'm going to try hard to maybe not express that, and just, or maybe if I am crying, I'm still speaking to my ancestors or my grandmother and saying, it's okay for you to go. I just need to be in my emotions right now. So it's like integrating that experience. So let the afterlife know it's okay. And then also for me, like, what I've learned is I need to process my emotions. I don't want to just stuff it down.
Yes.
So hopefully that answered that question of like that conflict or that challenge when things are conflicting.
So there's often a sense in between. So it's just a matter of you on how a person processes it, and then able to integrate everything. I mean, you are being respectful of what your own culture is, but at the same time, I agree. You have to like show it. We can't be stuck on, like holding it in when we don't, because again, when the pressure is too high, it will find a way to come out.
Right.
So I agree on that. And building on that point, how does language impact access to mental resources in the Asian community?
Oh my gosh, so much, because especially for our elders that don't speak English very well. Like I've had that experience when my grandmother was still alive, and I was learning more about how trauma impacts mental health, and she's really my inspiration for getting into the work that I do. And I was trying to find her a provider that spoke Vietnamese, and really couldn't find anyone. And it made it even harder because I'm trying to find a provider that speaks Vietnamese that accepts Medicare and Medicaid, which I was even having a hard time finding in California. But eventually, like a big part of why we had to move her back was just I couldn't find resources for someone that spoke the language, that accepts insurance, and was able to offer that out here. It was easier out in California for us. And so I think not having access to someone that could speak the language is really tough, because if part of therapy, at least westernized therapy, is talk therapy is what we're most used to, but there's so many other different forms of therapy. But even with the other forms too, there's things like somatic therapy where they're working with getting in tune with the body and how you feel, and describing how you feel within your body as emotions are coming up. You still need to be able to speak to someone to be able to express and process. So if we don't have that language access, it's really hard to be able to tap into those healing modalities or different types of therapies.
I agree with that. And also it feels safer when you talk with someone who not only speaks your language but understands the culture behind it. Like, of course in our communities also, it's like, okay, you need to pray about it. But yes, I agree, it's essential. It is very important that you pray to a higher being, but also you also need to treat it scientifically. But yeah, and then for a provider to understand that, they would be able to find a better method or a solution. So, and then at the same time, it's also being able to provide those materials, resource materials that are in language also, because it's hard to understand those medical terms, especially when you mention the Medicare. It's very daunting to understand and find the meaning of all those medical terms. So it's absolutely important to have resources that are in language as well. And importantly is the trust. The trust on having providers and making sure they are able to know the culture and then the tradition too. And on a related note, I'd like to ask about what culturally rooted or community-based practices have been helpful in mental health healing.
For me personally, I would say meditation is a big one. And my meditation journey started way back. I grew up Buddhist, but it was more of, we went to a temple and my dad would do the prayers every morning and every night with incense, and we have our altar of our ancestors and all that. But I don't think I practiced meditation within my family. So it's something I found outside on my own. And then the more that I've done it, I've realized how much of a Buddhist background and foundation that it has. And, but yeah, just to be able to sit and be able to be present with our emotions, be present to our experiences, I think has been the biggest thing, because oftentimes, especially when life is stressful, things get hard, or we're going through a loss or a grief, sometimes our mind just wants to check out, or we're just, somewhere else because it's too much to handle. But what I've learned is getting to the breath and sitting and being present with it and being mindful is a big part of processing that emotion, and just reminding myself that emotions is part of the human experience. I'm not a robot. I can't just get rid of it. And so if this thing is coming up and it's impacting me a certain way, to sit with it, breathe through it. And even when the emotions are hard, it's uncomfortable, it's heavy, it hurts. Sometimes it feels like it physically hurts.
You have to face it.
To just sit with it and breathe through it, because that's the part where, okay, once I feel it, I can release it. If not, it just kind of stays stuck in my body, and it's festers.
It comes out in something.
In other ways that we
Yeah.
don't want it to, like through anger, through frustration, through sadness, through feeling unmotivated. Like it shows up in other ways that isn't, well received
Pleasant.
by others sometimes.
Yeah. But how do you do it, Trinh? Because like meditation, how do you like stay still and then not let your mind wander off? Me, like in yoga, not just like yoga, which is I know it's different. I can't sit still for about 15 minutes. So how do you do it?
Great question. So I've learned like over the years too that there's also moving like mindfulness. So you don't have to always be still. And then I think the biggest piece that I've learned more recently too, because I also at one point thought like I need to clear my mind, like, but with anxiety my thoughts are racing all the time, like, am I doing this wrong? And then I learned that it's not about clearing your mind, it's about being present. And even when thoughts come up, it's okay. So instead of saying, oh my gosh, you're doing it wrong, or see, I can't just sit and be quiet and be still, because then we're judging and shaming ourselves, which is not what we want out of it. But it's to notice, like, oh, okay, that thought came up. Because sometimes we're in a thought and we don't even realize we're in a thought. So if we notice and we say, oh, that thought came up, okay, and we just kind of let it go, and then we come back to our breath and be present in our body. And it might be that there's a thought every other second, but you're just coming back to the breath. Like you notice, like, oh, okay, a thought came up. Let's come back to the breath and be present, feeling in my body. And for some people that maybe sitting still doesn't work, and they prefer to do an activity, but there's a difference between I'm walking at the park and I'm on my phone, or I'm thinking about tomorrow, or I'm thinking about what I did yesterday, or I'm thinking about all these things, versus I'm at the park and I'm walking and I'm enjoying the sunshine and I'm listening to the birds and I'm feeling the warmth of the sun and the breeze on my skin, and I'm going to be present in this moment and just really check into my five senses. Like, what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I feeling? And how can I just be present here? So to me, that's been the difference of, and it's not perfect, even though I've been doing it for a while, and I got introduced to meditation back in 2015. I still have, my mind wanders all the time, or sometimes I sit down and I try to meditate for 30 minutes, but I could only do 10 because then I'm just like getting agitated. Antsy, and it's not perfect, but I know that when I sit down, that's what I'm striving for, is just to be present, to notice, and then to not have any judgment of being in the present moment.
So there are different ways, and it's really about being intentional and having the you said it earlier, like being in the present moment. So I love that. And so healing doesn't always have to be clinical.
No, absolutely not. For some people, self-help is a form of healing. Getting together every week in a group and just processing what they're going through. Or for some people, maybe journaling helps. Or maybe for some people, especially people with indigenous practices, maybe going back to those roots help, whether it's plant medicine, whether it's working with a shaman, whether it's working with, like I said, acupuncture. I don't know if that's considered, some people might consider it clinical, some people might not, or herbal medicine.
Those are all okay. So it really depends on, the approach that you will take.
In my view, because then that's incorporating all of our cultural backgrounds, because how can I say an entire culture, especially with, like, say, herbal medicine that's been around for thousands of years, that it's not right or that it's wrong, because there's been different uses. Just because science or research hasn't done much research into it or hasn't caught up doesn't mean that something that someone's practiced for thousands of years is wrong, in a sense.
Right.
And so to me, it's like if someone is saying, hey, I'm using this and I feel better, it's helping with my anxiety.
Yes.
Every experience is so individual. And plus, even with science, if we talk about research, no research has ever said 100% of people get well on this thing.
On just one thing.
Right. Like there's maybe a high percentage, but then what about the rest of the people? What do they do? So we can't say that there's a one size fit all. To me, it's how can we open up the door for options and opportunities and educate people on maybe the benefits and the risk of each thing that they might want to engage in, and then allow people to choose based on their background, their beliefs, their experiences, their cultures, to say, okay, this is what fits for me and this is what I want to do for part of my recovery. And maybe they might do different things at different points in life, because one thing isn't going to work the whole time. Maybe
that's true. Like for you years ago, this might be helpful for you, but at this point in your life, or even at your age, something different. Walking in the park may be your approach now. So it really is dependent also on the approach that you take and the time of your life too.
Yeah, and I think just the level, right? Because I'll use the analogy with health. When we get a cut, are we always going to go to the hospital to get stitches? It depends.
Yeah, it
right? Because
depends.
sometimes I just got a cut and I could put the Band-Aid on myself. Sometimes I need someone to help me because it's a little bit bigger and they need to help me clean it up. Sometimes it's so deep I need stitches from the hospital. So again, different points,
levels.
Yes, different points in our lives might require different types of modalities for healing.
I see. Okay, wow, that's very, very, very insightful. And when at NAMI, you're opening opportunities and providing educational awareness to our community. So are there any upcoming wellness events at your office that you'd like to share to our listeners?
Oh yeah, so every month we typically have yoga on Saturdays once a month, and then we might either have Pilates or art classes. So I don't know the specific ones off the top of my head, but if they go to our website, if you come to our website at www.namisouthernNevada.org, or you look up NAMI, we're on Eventbrite as well, you could find the different wellness classes that are at no cost to the community. Anyone can come in and you just register. We'll have the materials and everything set up for you, and experience a community where mental health is not taboo. People actually open up and share, or even weekly support groups on Wednesdays where people can drop in and find a group that they can connect with and share openly about their mental health experiences.
Oh, that's great. So no judgment.
No judgment, yeah.
Nice. And could you share with our listeners and viewers also the upcoming event on October?
Yeah. So we have our NAMI walks on Saturday, October 18th, which is open to the community. Again, no cost to register as a team or to register yourself as a walker. But if you want to fundraise, of course, we would really love that. But it's just a way to bring the community together. We usually have music, either a DJ or live music. We'll have snacks, and it's a way for the community to come together and get resources and to celebrate that mental health. There is recovery. Recovery is possible, that it's okay to have mental health challenges, and we're here to support one another. That's that feeling. Like sometimes we might hear people say, oh, you're not alone, or we might read the words. But when you are in community and you're there with people, you can feel what it feels like to know that you're not alone. And that's, for me, when I went to my very first NAMI walks in like 2015 or something, that was, to be in that and feel it really made a difference.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear, and very empowering event also. So definitely that's something that we will help spread the word and support as well. So before we wrap up, I'd like to close this episode with a question. What advice would you like to give our Asian American communities who are struggling with their mental health?
Yeah, I know a lot of us may have these experiences like generational traumas or experiences that might feel lonely. And I know for me, loving to learn, reading about it really helped a lot. Being open and talking to each other. It starts with us, right? So if someone's coming to us and they're sharing an experience, just take a moment to reflect of how are we going to respond to that? Because if collectively, as a whole community, we respond in a supportive, compassionate, kind manner, we can make the difference and change how our community talks about mental health. We can lift that stigma and the taboo aspect of it and actually provide support to one another. And when we feel ready for us to open up and share with others, because oftentimes what I've learned is that when I started sharing, other people felt comfortable to share, and that's what broke the stigma for us, is that somebody else did it first. So if people are feeling comfortable to say it's okay and to be open about it, I would say that's another big thing too.
I see. So it's a lot of support from our community and within our community as well, and being be open, vulnerable, to be able to share when you're ready. And as a receiver, it's being able to listen and then support that. So it's a long road, I believe, still a long road to really, I would say, like, minimize the stigma and also the taboo. But it starts with all of us to ensure that we get the right help that we need and support each other. So
Absolutely. And to discern too, because not everyone deserves to hear the story.
Yeah.
Not everyone might be ready. So we might not, depending on our employer, depending on our, circle of people, knowing the right people that we can open up to and trust is going to be a big one. Because as we slowly do the work, it takes, for me, it took opening up to my close circle, like my siblings, then my relatives, then my close friends, and then work and that sort of thing.
very, very good point, Trinh.
Yeah.
I like what you said, that be able to discern and speak to the people that you feel comfortable first and trust. So, well, thank you so much, Trinh, for being here and then making time to
Absolutely.
talk about and help our own community. So visit NAMI website for more resources and other community events that they have. So to our listeners and viewers, thank you for joining us on another episode of Film in Focus, a program by the Asian Community Development Council. For more information about ACDC, please visit our website at acdcnv.org and follow us on our social media channels for future events, programs, and podcast episodes. Abangan po ang aming susunod na episode. Hanggat sa muli. Maraming salamat!